Say to yourself first thing in the morning, I shall meet with people who are meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, and unsociable. They are subject to these faults because of their ignorance of what is good and bad. But I have recognized the nature of the good and seen that it is the right, and the nature of the bad and seen that it is the wrong, and the nature of the wrongdoer himself, and seen that he is related to me, not because he has the same blood or seed, but because he shares the same mind and portion of divinity. So I cannot be harmed by any of them, as no one will involve me in what is wrong, nor can I be angry with my relative or hate him. We were born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. So to work against each other is contrary to nature, and resentment and rejection count as working against someone. What makes up this being of mine is flesh, and a bit of breath, and the ruling center. Put down your books. Do not distrust yourself with them any more. That is not granted to you. As if you were on the point of death, despise the flesh, just blood, bones, and the network of nerves, veins, and arteries. Consider what sort of thing breath is, a stream of air, and not always the same, but at each moment belched out and drawn in again. The third part of you is the ruling center. Look at it this way. You are an old man. No longer allow this part of you to be enslaved anymore. No longer allow it to be tugged this way and that like a puppet by each unsociable motive. No longer allow it to be discontented with its present fate or to flinch from its future one. The works of the gods are full of providence, and the works of fortune are not separate from nature, or the interweaving and intertwining of the things governed by providence. Everything flows from there. Further factors are necessity and the benefit of the whole universe, of which you are a part. What is brought by the nature of the whole, and what maintains that nature is good for each part of nature. Just as the changes in the elements maintain the universe, so too do the changes in the compounds. Let these things satisfy you. Let these always be your doctrines. Give up your thirst for books, so that you do not die grumbling on, but positively, genuinely, full-heartedly grateful to the gods. Remember how long you have been putting this off, and how often, when given a period of grace by the gods, you have not used it. But now it is high time to recognize what is the universe of which you form a part, and who is the director of the universe of whom you constitute an offshoot, and to see that there is a limit set to your time, and if you do not use it to clear the fog from your mind, the moment will be gone, and you will be gone, and the opportunity will not come again. At every hour, give your full concentration, as a Roman and a man, to carrying out the task in hand with a scrupulous and unaffected dignity, and affectionate concern for others, and freedom and justice, and give yourself space from all other concerns. You will give yourself this if you carry out each act as if it were the last of your life, freed from all randomness and passionate deviation from the rule of reason, and from pretense and self-love, and dissatisfaction with what has been allotted to you. You see how few things you need to master to be able to live a smoothly flowing and God-fearing life. The gods will ask no more from someone who maintains these principles. You are doing violence to yourself. Violence. My mind. And you will have no more opportunity for treating yourself with honor. Life for each of us is short. This life of yours is almost completed, though you do not respect yourself, but place your own well-being in the minds of other people. Do external events distract you in some way? Then give yourself the space to learn some good new lesson and stop wandering aimlessly. But now you must be careful to avoid another kind of wandering around. Foolish too, and in their actions, are those who have been exhausted by life, and who have no aim to which they can direct every motive and, in fact, every thought. You don't often see people being unhappy because they don't pay attention to what is going on in someone else's mind. But those who don't follow closely the movements of their own mind will necessarily be unhappy. One should always keep in mind these things: what the nature of the whole is, and what my nature is, and how my nature is related to that of the whole, and what kind of part it is of what kind of whole, and that no one can prevent me from always doing and saying what is in accordance with nature, of which I am a part. Theophrastus speaks like a true philosopher when, comparing wrongdoings, as people rather commonly do make such comparisons, he says that it is more serious to go wrong through desire than through anger. When someone is angry, he seems to turn his back on reason with a certain kind of pain and an unconscious contraction of the heart. But when someone goes wrong because of desire and is then overpowered by pleasure, he somehow seems more self-indulgent and more unmanly in his wrongdoing. Theophrastus then speaks rightly, and as a philosopher should, when he says that wrongdoing that involves pleasure deserves more blame than that which involves pain. Generally speaking, the later case seems to be one where someone has had wrong done to him first, and has been forced to become angry through pain, while in the former case he has set out of his own accord to do wrong, driven to do what he does by desire. In all your actions, words, and thoughts, be aware that it is possible that you may depart from life at any time. But leaving the human race is nothing to be afraid of. If the gods exist, they would not involve you in anything bad. And if they do not exist or have no concern for human affairs, why should I live in a universe empty of gods and empty of providence? But the gods do exist and have concern for human affairs, and have placed it wholly in the power of human beings never to meet what is truly bad. As for the other things, if any of them had been bad, they would have taken measures also to ensure that it was open to everyone not to meet that. If something does not make a person worse, how could it make his life worse? The nature of the whole could not have overlooked these things, either through ignorance or, while knowing, because it was unable to prevent them or put them right. Nor could it have made so great a mistake, either through lack of power or lack of skill, as to allow good and bad things to happen to good and bad people alike without discrimination. But in fact, death and life, fame and lack of fame, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty, all these things happen to good and bad people alike, though they are neither right nor wrong. Therefore, they are not good or bad. How quickly all things vanish, both the bodies of themselves in the universe, and the memories of them in time. What is the nature of all the things that we perceive? Especially those that seduce us by pleasure, or frighten us with pain, or are celebrated with empty pride. How cheap these things are, and despicable, and shoddy, and perishable, and dead. These questions are for the power of the mind to determine. Also, what these people are whose opinions and voices produce celebrity and its absence, and what death is, and that if one looks at it in isolation and uses analysis of the concept to dissolve the false impressions that surround it, you will realize that it is nothing but a function of nature. And if anyone is frightened of a function of nature, he is a mere child. But this is not only a function of nature, but also beneficial to it, in how a human being makes contact with God and with what part of himself, and when that part of the person is in what condition. Nothing is more pathetic than the person who makes a circuit of everything, and as the poet says, searches into the depths of the earth, and probes by indications what is going on in the minds of his neighbors, but fails to realize that it is enough to hold on to the guardian spirit within himself, and to give true service to this. This service is to keep it pure from passion, randomness, and discontent with whatever comes from gods and human beings. What comes from gods deserves our reverence because of their goodness. What comes from human beings is dear to us because they are our relatives. But also sometimes, in a certain way, it deserves our pity because of their ignorance of what is good and bad. This is no less a disability than the inability to distinguish black from white. Even if you were going to live for 3,000 years, or 10 times as long, still remember that no one loses any life other than the one he is living now, or lives any life other than the one he loses. So the longest and the shortest amount to the same thing. The present is equal for all, and so what is passing away is also equal, and what is being lost turns out to be the merest moment, as no one could lose the past or the future. How could anyone lose when he is not God? So always remember these two things. First, that everything is the same in kind from eternity, and recurs in circles, and that it makes no difference whether you will see the same things for 100 years, or 2,000, or for an infinite time. Second, that both the one who lives longest and the one who is earliest to die lose an equal amount. The present moment is the only thing of which anyone can be deprived, at least if this is the only thing he has, and he cannot lose what he has not got. Everything is what you suppose it to be. This resort to the cynic monimus is clear enough. But clear also is the usefulness of the saying, if one accepts the core meaning, as far as it is true. The human mind does violence to itself most of all whenever it becomes, as far as it can, an outgrowth and a kind of tumor on the universe. To resent anything that happens is to grow apart from nature, which embraces the nature of other things. Again, our mind does so too when it turns away from any human being or moves against him wanting to do him harm, as when people lose their temper. Thirdly, it does violence to itself when it is defeated by pleasure or pain. Fourthly, when it acts a part, it does or says anything with pretense or falsehood. Fifthly, when it fails to direct any of its actions or motives towards any goal, but acts in a random and inconsequential way, although even the smallest thing should be done with reverence to the end. The end for rational animals is to follow the reason and rule of the most ancient city and constitution. In a human life, one's time is an instant. One's existence is flux. Perception is dim. The composition of the body as a whole is subject to decay, the mind wandering, fortune unpredictable, fame precarious. To sum this up, everything belonging to the body is a river, and everything belonging to the mind is a dream and a delusion. Life is a war, and a brief stay in a foreign land, and fame after death is oblivion. What, then, can guide us on our way? One thing, and one thing only: philosophy. This consists in keeping the guardian spirit within us unviolated and unharmed, master of pleasure and pain, doing nothing in a random manner, and nothing with falseness or pretense, not needing someone else to do or not to do something. Also in accepting what happens and what is allotted to one as coming from the source from which one came one itself, and above all, waiting for death with a confident mind, since it is nothing but the dissolution of the elements of which every living creature is composed. If for the elements themselves there is nothing to be feared in their continuous change from one into another, why should we fear the change and dissolution of all of them? It is in accordance with nature, and nothing bad can be in accordance with nature.